CrimeScope has detected retro nostalgia, Electra-Woman, Dyna Girl, the algorithm Minty. Before there was Buffy the Vampire Slayer, before Xena, Warrior Princess, before Kim Possible, and long before superhero movies were making billions of dollars at the box office, two reporters in brightly covered spandex were battling villains with names like Spider Lady, the Empress of Evil, and Glitter Rock. Their secret weapon? A wrist communicator that could apparently do anything short of preparing your taxes. It was colorful. It was campy. It was completely ridiculous. And for a generation of kids growing up in the 1970s and early 1980s, it was must-see television. This is the story of Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl, one of the most unusual superhero shows ever to hit Saturday morning television. If you grew up during the 1970s, there's a good chance that Sid and Marty Krofft were responsible for at least some of your childhood memories. These were the creative minds behind H.R. Pufnstuf, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, The Bugaloos, and Land of the Lost. The Krofft brothers specialized in creating worlds that felt unlike anything else on television. Their shows were colorful, imaginative, and often just strange enough to leave a lasting impression. In 1976, they decided to enter the superhero business. Rather than license an existing comic book character, they created their own superhero duo. The result was Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl, a series that borrowed some of the spirit of the 1960s Batman television show while adding a distinctly Krofft-style level of creativity and chaos. And even today, nearly 50 years later, it remains one of the most memorable superhero shows of the Saturday morning era.
Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl, fighting all evil deeds. Each writes for a magazine, hiding the life she leads. Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl. Summon to Electra, faced by Electra-Comp they wear. Laurie and Judy dare to face any criminal anywhere. Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl.
Welcome back, everyone. Let's fire up CrimeScope and take a closer look at one of television's most delightfully weird superhero adventures. To understand why Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl existed, you must understand the television landscape of the mid-1970s. The superhero genre looked very different back then. Marvel and DC hadn't taken over Hollywood. There were no cinematic universes, no streaming platforms, no endless parade of origin stories. For most kids, superheroes were something you watched on Saturday mornings. The enormous success of ABC's live-action Batman during the 1960s had proven that audiences enjoyed colorful heroes, outrageous villains, and larger-than-life adventures. Even after Batman left the air, television producers continued searching for ways to capture that same energy. The Kroffts saw an opportunity. Why not create a superhero adventure aimed directly at younger viewers? And why not make those heroes women? That decision made Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl stand out immediately. Years before Hollywood embraced female-led action franchises, Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl were already saving the day every week. The series debuted in 1976 as part of the Krofft Super Show. Rather than airing as its own standalone program, it appeared as one segment within a larger variety-style series. Each adventure was roughly 12 minutes long. That might not sound like much today, but those short episodes moved at an incredible pace. The writers didn't have time for lengthy exposition. A villain would appear, a crime would be committed, a bizarre scheme would unfold, and before you knew it, Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl were racing into action. That format kept things fast, energetic, and, surprisingly, entertaining. The show's heroes were Lori and Judy. When they weren't fighting crime, they worked as reporters for Newsmaker magazine. When danger appeared, they became Electra-Woman and Dyna Girl. Lori, better known as Electra-Woman, was played by Deidre Hall. Now, if that name sounds familiar to daytime television fans, there's a very good reason. At nearly the same time she was battling colorful supervillains on Saturday morning, Hall was also beginning what would become one of the most iconic roles in soap opera history, Dr. Marlena Evans on Days of Our Lives. Looking back, it's kind of funny. In the morning, she'd be using futuristic gadgets to stop criminals and save the city. By the afternoon, she'd be navigating the latest romantic drama in Salem. That's quite a range for one actress. One memory that really stands out came years later during the show's infamous possession storyline. If you watched Days of Our Lives in the mid-1990s, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. Suddenly, Marlena wasn't just dealing with the usual soap opera problems. She was possessed by the devil. Yes, the devil. Her eyes glowed, her voice changed, people levitated. The story became so outrageous that it felt like daytime television had wandered into the Twilight Zone. Even by soap opera standards, it was wild. And every time I think about that storyline, I can't help but laugh at the fact that the same actress who once fought Glitterrock and Spider Lady on Saturday mornings eventually found herself fighting literal demonic possession on daytime television. When you look at it that way, Deidre Hall may have had one of the strangest and most entertaining television careers of her time. And somehow, she made it all work. Judy, or Dyna Girl, was played by Judy Stranges. And while a lot of people remember her as Dyna Girl, she'd already been building a television career for years before putting on the costume. In fact, she'd been acting since she was a child and spent 4 seasons playing Helen Loomis on the popular series Room 222. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, she did voice work for Hanna-Barbera cartoons, including shows like The Roman Holidays, Butch Cassidy, Willie and the Chopper Bunch, Saturday Supercade, and Moon Dreamers. As kids, we rarely paid attention to voice credits. We just knew the characters. Rewatching these shows as adults, it's always fun to discover that many of the faces and voices we grew up with were connected in ways we never realized. Supporting them from the Electra base was Professor Frank Heflin, played by veteran actor Norman Alden. Frank was the team's inventor, technical expert, and the guy who somehow managed to keep all of Electra-Woman's impossible gadgets running from week to week. And here's a fun little piece of Saturday morning television trivia. Norman Alden wasn't just Professor Frank. He was also the voice of Aquaman on Super Friends. I had no idea these two characters were played by the same person. Looking back though, I love discovering these little connections between the shows I grew up watching. Super Friends was one of my favorite cartoons. Like a lot of kids, I spent countless Saturday mornings watching Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and the rest of the Justice League saving the world before lunchtime. It's kind of funny to realize, while I was watching Professor Frank help Electra Woman track down villains, I was also hearing the same voice, helping the Justice League battle Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom. That's one of the joys of revisiting these old shows as an adult. You start noticing all the connections that completely flew over your head as a kid. Back then, Norman Alden was just Professor Frank. Today, he's Professor Frank and Aquaman. And that makes me appreciate his contributions to Saturday morning even more. Together, they operated out of a hidden headquarters known as Electra Base. And this is where the show truly embraced the wonderful excess of 1970s television. The command center featured blinking lights, futuristic consoles, and a gigantic crime-fighting computer known as CrimeScope. Looking at it today, CrimeScope resembles what might happen if somebody combined a television control room with an arcade machine, and then added every flashing light they could find. As a kid, though, it looked amazing. Television computers looked like they could launch rockets, track criminals, and order pizza all at the same time. CrimeScope looked capable of all three. Every superhero show needs a signature moment. For Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, that moment was the Electra change. Whenever trouble appeared, the duo activated their Electra-Comps and instantly transformed into costume. A burst of flashing lights, a quick special effect, and suddenly the heroes were ready for action. Modern audiences might chuckle at the simplicity of the effect, but that's part of the charm. You can see creativity behind it. The show was doing everything it could to make kids believe they were witnessing futuristic technology. And for many viewers, it worked. Then there were the Electra-Comps. These oversized wrist communicators were the Swiss Army knives of superhero gadgets. They could scan, track, communicate, project energy beams, create force fields, analyze clues, locate suspects, and occasionally solve whatever problems the writers needed solved that week. At one point, they even introduced a function called Electra Split, because apparently creating duplicates of objects was just another feature hidden inside the menu. The writers approached gadget design with remarkable confidence. If a new power would make the episode more exciting, the Electra-Comp suddenly had that power. No questions asked. Let's put it this way. The show never worried much about limitations. It prioritized imagination. And that's one of the reasons people still remember it. The Electra-Comps weren't the only impressive technology. The heroes also drove the Electra car. This futuristic three-wheeled vehicle looked unlike anything else on television. And as if that wasn't enough, it could transform into the Electra plane. Why settle for one vehicle when you can have two? One of the most enjoyable things about revisiting the series is realizing that the writers never felt constrained by reality. The heroes weren't operating according to ordinary rules. They lived in a world where a flying, crime-fighting vehicle sounds perfectly reasonable. That's pure Croft logic. And it's wonderful. As much as I enjoy the heroes, let's be honest about one thing. The villains are often the biggest reason people remember this series. The Crofts didn't create ordinary criminals. They created characters that felt as if they had stepped out of a costume warehouse located inside of a disco. There was the Empress of Evil, the Sorcerer, the Spider Lady, Alibaba, Cleopatra, and the Pharaoh. A pair of ancient rulers who somehow found themselves causing trouble for Electra Woman and Dyna Girl. Because this was a Sid and Marty Krofft production, nobody ever stopped to ask questions like, how did Cleopatra end up here? They simply rolled with the idea and expected the audience to do the same. And one of the fun surprises I discovered while revisiting the series was that Cleopatra was played by Jane Elliott. Now, that name immediately caught my attention. You see, growing up, another show that was often on at my grandmother's house was General Hospital. Just like Days of Our Lives, it was one of those programs that seemed to be a permanent fixture in the afternoon schedule. Back then, I wasn't paying attention to actors' names. I just knew the characters. So it never occurred to me that the actress playing a villain on a Saturday morning superhero show would later become one of the most recognizable faces in daytime television. Jane Elliott is best known to soap opera fans as Tracy Quartermain, a role she has played off and on for decades, and one she was still appearing in during 2026. Perhaps the greatest villain name in the show's entire history, Glitter Rock, a glam rock supervillain. Somewhere, a writer pitched that idea in a meeting and somehow convinced everyone else it was brilliant. And you know what? They were right. These villains weren't subtle. They weren't realistic, but they were unforgettable. The show worked because everyone committed to the premise. Nobody seemed embarrassed by the costumes. Nobody treated the material as a joke. The actors performed every bizarre situation with complete sincerity. That commitment made the whole world believable. Kids accepted it because the show accepted it. The villains were outrageous. The gadgets were ridiculous. The plots, they could be absurd. Yet the series approached all of it with total confidence. That confidence carried the entire production. Despite its popularity among young viewers, Electra Woman and Dyna Girl lasted only one season. Just 16 adventures were produced. A major reason was its place within the Krofft Super Show. As the larger format evolved, segments changed, and characters came and went. Electra Woman and Dyna Girl became one of the casualties of that process. Had the show received multiple seasons or expanded merchandising support, it might occupy a much larger place in television history today. Instead, it became something different. A cult favorite. One of those shows people rediscover years later and immediately wonder why they forgot about it in the first place. Like many cult classics, Electra Woman and Dyna Girl eventually found new life. A revival pilot was produced by the WB in 2001, but never moved forward as a series. A much more successful return arrived in 2016 when YouTube personalities Grace Helbig and Hannah Hart starred in a reboot that introduced the concept to a new generation. That's not a bad legacy for a show with only 16 original adventures. What makes Electra Woman and Dyna Girl memorable nearly 50 years later? It's not the special effects. It's not the production budget. It's not even the stories themselves. It's the personality. The bright costumes, the strange gadgets, the outrageous villains, the complete lack of concern for realism. The series captured a time when children's television could be imaginative, sincere, colorful, and wonderfully weird all at once. Watching it today feels like opening a time capsule from the golden age of Saturday mornings. Electra Woman and Dyna Girl may not have lasted very long, but its impact continues to be felt. Long before female superheroes became common in movies and television, Laurie and Judy were already saving the world with courage, intelligence, and more futuristic gadgets than any two people reasonably needed. The series remains one of the most charming products of the Sid and Marty Krofft universe. A superhero adventure that could only have come from the 1970s. And that's exactly why people still remember it. Whether you remember Electra Woman and Dyna Girl from its original run, or you're discovering it for the very first time, I hope you enjoyed this trip back into television history. Be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know your memories of the show down in the comments. And until next time, stay Electra-Minty, stay Electra-Fresh, and if Crime Scope taught us anything, it's that the future needed a lot more blinking lights.